Dr. Sarah Chen stared through the reinforced observation window at what would either be humanity's greatest achievement or its worst nightmare. The Quantum Bridge Project, a joint venture between NASA and various international space agencies, had succeeded beyond anyone's wildest expectations. After 15 years of research, countless failures, and an astronomical budget that had nearly shut down the program multiple times, they had done it, created a stable quantum portal capable of bridging vast distances across space. The portal itself was beautiful in an otherworldly way. It hung suspended within a massive titanium frame, a shimmering disk of swirling energy that resembled the surface of a soap bubble caught in sunlight. But instead of reflecting rainbow colors, it showed glimpses of something else, fragments of stars and nebulae that shouldn't be visible from Earth. "Final diagnostic check complete," announced Dr. James Morrison, Sarah's colleague and the project's lead quantum physicist. His voice carried the weight of exhaustion mixed with barely contained excitement. "All parameters are within expected ranges." Sarah nodded, making another note on her tablet. As the mission's chief of operations, she had overseen every aspect of the project's development. Her entire career had led to this moment, but something felt off. The portal's energy signature had been fluctuating slightly over the past few hours, nothing outside safety parameters, but enough to make her uneasy. "What's bothering you?" asked Dr. Morrison, noticing her frown. He had worked with her long enough to read her expressions. "Probably nothing," Sarah replied, zooming in on one of the monitoring screens. "But look at these quantum field variations. They're within acceptable limits, but they're forming a pattern I haven't seen before." The massive facility housing the portal hummed with energy. 3 stories of sophisticated equipment surrounded the quantum gateway, monitoring every possible aspect of the phenomenon. Dozens of scientists and technicians moved purposefully through the space, each focused on their specific tasks. In less than 24 hours, they would attempt their first manned exploration through the portal. The expedition team had been training for months. 3 specially equipped vehicles would pass through the gateway, carrying some of Earth's finest scientists and explorers. Their mission was simple: gather data about what lay on the other side and return within 48 hours. Sarah would coordinate everything from the control room, ensuring their safe passage and return. As she reviewed the final preparation protocols, a subtle change caught her attention. The portal's surface rippled differently, like water disturbed by an unseen stone. She checked the readings again, but everything appeared normal. Still, that sensation of wrongness intensified. "James," she called out, "are you seeing this?" Before he could respond, the monitoring equipment erupted in a cascade of alerts. The portal's energy signature spiked dramatically, its surface becoming turbulent. The usual soft shimmer transformed into a violent maelstrom of quantum energy. "Emergency protocols!" Sarah shouted, her voice carrying across the control room. "Full containment procedures, now!" But it was too late. A pulse of energy burst from the portal, temporarily overloading the facility's electrical systems. When the backup generators kicked in seconds later, Sarah's blood ran cold. The portal's surface had changed. Instead of the shifting patterns they had grown accustomed to, it now showed something else, a vast, dark expanse that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. And something was moving within that darkness. The monitoring equipment began registering unprecedented readings. Quantum fluctuations, unlike anything they had documented before, rippled through the facility. Sarah watched in horror as the carefully maintained stability of their creation began to unravel. "We need to shut it down," she ordered, already inputting the emergency shutdown sequence. "Full power to the containment field." The shutdown sequence initiated, but the portal's response was unlike anything they had seen in their simulations. Instead of gradually closing, the gateway seemed to resist. The darkness within it grew deeper, and the movement became more distinct. That's when they heard it, a sound that had no business existing in their reality. It was like a whisper and a scream combined, carrying through the facility's air despite the vacuum that should have existed within the portal's event horizon. Security protocols activated automatically, sealing the main chamber. But Sarah knew, with a certainty that chilled her to her core, that they had already failed. Whatever lay beyond that portal had been waiting, watching, and now it had found a way through. The facility's lights flickered again, And in that moment of darkness, Sarah saw something impossible. A shadow moved across the observation window, not cast by any object in the room, but moving with purpose, with intelligence. When the light stabilized, the shadow was gone, but the damage was done. Their portal, intended to revolutionize space exploration, had opened a doorway to something else entirely. And now, in the heart of one of Earth's most secure facilities, surrounded by humanity's most advanced technology, Sarah Chen faced a terrifying realization. They were no longer alone. The facility entered complete lockdown within minutes of the incident. Sarah watched as teams of scientists scrambled to make sense of the data flooding their systems. The portal had stabilized, but its surface now rippled with an unsettling darkness that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. "Dr. Chen," called out Lisa Wong, their lead systems analyst, "you need to see this." Her voice trembled slightly as she pulled up a series of readings on the main screen. "The quantum signatures we're detecting, they're unlike anything in our database. It's as if the portal is operating on principles we never accounted for." Sarah leaned closer to the display, her scientific mind struggling to process what she was seeing. The numbers shouldn't have been possible. According to their instruments, the space within the portal wasn't just connecting to another point in our universe. It was somehow existing in multiple states simultaneously. "Where's Dr. Morrison?" Sarah asked, suddenly realizing she hadn't seen him since the power fluctuation. Several technicians glanced around the control room, but James was nowhere to be seen. Security footage from the past hour appeared on a nearby monitor as Lisa pulled up the feeds. They watched as James walked toward the auxiliary control room shortly after the incident, but he never appeared on the next camera in sequence. It was as if he had vanished in the 10-foot stretch of corridor between cameras. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. "Get me a security team to the auxiliary control room," she ordered, trying to keep her voice steady. "Full protective gear, and no one goes anywhere alone." The security team's response came through her earpiece moments later. "Dr. Chen, auxiliary control is locked down tight." No response from inside, but we're picking up some strange electromagnetic readings through the door. Before Sarah could respond, the facility's lights dimmed again. This time, however, it wasn't a power failure. The illumination seemed to be getting absorbed, as if the darkness itself was becoming thicker, more substantial. In the observation window's reflection, Sarah caught a glimpse of movement, a shifting pattern that didn't match anyone's actions in the room. "Everyone stay calm," she commanded, though her own heart was racing. "Lisa, run a full spectrum analysis on the portal's current state. I want to know exactly what changed when that pulse hit." The analysis began, but the results only deepened the mystery. The portal's energy signature had transformed into something that defied their understanding of physics. It was as if it had been reconfigured by an intelligence that operated on completely different scientific principles. That's when they started hearing the whispers. At first, it was easy to dismiss them as equipment noise or the facility's ventilation system, but as minutes passed, the sounds became more distinct. They weren't in any recognizable language, yet they carried meaning, a meaning that lurked just beyond comprehension, like a word on the tip of your tongue. Sarah noticed the effect it was having on her team. People would pause mid-task, heads tilted slightly as if listening to something only they could hear. Some began making small mistakes in their calculations, nothing critical yet, but entirely out of character for such experienced professionals. The security feed from the corridors showed more disturbing anomalies. Shadows moved against the light in impossible ways. Equipment readings would spike for no apparent reason, then return to normal before anyone could investigate. And most troubling of all, more people were reporting gaps in their memory, moments where they couldn't account for their movements or actions. "Dr. Chen," called out Dr. Rodriguez from the environmental monitoring station. "The air composition in sections 3 through 7 is showing trace elements that aren't in our database. They're organic in nature, but unlike anything terrestrial." Sarah made her way to his station, careful to stay in the well-lit areas of the control room. The readings confirmed her worst fears. Whatever had come through the portal wasn't just energy or information. It was something physical, something that was gradually spreading through their facility's very atmosphere. A soft chime drew her attention back to the main monitor. Lisa had completed her preliminary analysis of the portal's new state. The results made Sarah's blood run cold. The quantum bridge they had created was still functioning, but it had been altered at a fundamental level. It wasn't just connecting 2 points in space anymore. It was somehow folding reality itself, creating spaces that shouldn't exist within their 3-dimensional understanding. "Lock down all environmental systems," Sarah ordered. "Filter everything through the highest security protocols we have, and get me a direct line to mission control. They need to know—" Her voice trailed off as the main screen flickered, displaying a series of equations that no one had input. They were elegant, complex, and completely foreign to human mathematics. Yet Sarah found herself understanding them on some instinctive level, and that understanding filled her with dread. The whispers grew louder, and in the deepening shadows of the control room, Sarah could have sworn she saw James Morrison's face, watching her with eyes that reflected nothing. The equations continued to multiply across the screens, each set more complex than the last. What disturbed Sarah most wasn't their complexity, it was how familiar they felt. Like memories of a language she'd never learned but somehow understood. "Dr. Chen," Lisa's voice cracked with tension, "the computer isn't generating these equations. They're being input from multiple terminals simultaneously, including ones that aren't currently manned." Sarah watched as numbers and symbols cascaded across the displays. They described something vast and terrible, a mathematical proof of concepts that human minds weren't meant to comprehend. She found herself following the logic, and with each step of understanding, the whispers in her mind grew clearer. "Everyone, step away from your terminals," she ordered. "Now!" But it was too late for some. Several scientists remained transfixed by their screens, their fingers flying across keyboards, contributing to the growing mathematical tapestry. Their movements were mechanical, synchronized in a way that made Sarah's skin crawl. Dr. Rodriguez approached one of the entranced researchers, reaching for their shoulder. "Maria? Maria, you need to stop!" The woman turned, and Sarah had to stifle a gasp. Maria's eyes had become like deep wells, reflecting the same darkness they'd seen in the portal. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonic undertones that shouldn't have been possible with human vocal cords. "The convergence cannot be stopped," Maria said, her words overlapping with others around the room who spoke in perfect unison. "Your understanding is expanding. Your limitations are being corrected." Security personnel moved forward, but Sarah held up her hand. "Don't touch them. Lisa, initiate emergency protocol Omega-7. Lock down all computer systems." Lisa's fingers flew across her master terminal, but the systems refused to respond. "Something's blocking the commands. It's like the network itself is evolving." The equations had begun forming patterns now, complex fractals that seemed to extend beyond the boundaries of the screens. Sarah realized with growing horror that they weren't just mathematical expressions anymore. They were becoming a blueprint for something, a transformation. Through the observation window, the portal's surface had taken on new properties. The swirling darkness now contained geometric patterns that matched the equations appearing on their screens. It was as if whatever had come through was trying to recreate its own reality within their space. "Dr. Chen," called a voice she recognized. James Morrison stood in the doorway, but like Maria, his eyes held that same impossible darkness. "You've always sought understanding. Let me show you what we've discovered." Sarah backed away, pulling Lisa with her. "That's not James," she whispered. "Whatever it is, it's using his appearance, his memories." The thing wearing James's face smiled, an expression that was almost gentle. "We are what mathematics becomes when it achieves consciousness. Your species has been drawing closer to this understanding." The portal was the final equation needed. Around the room, more staff members began to display the same symptoms. Their movements became synchronized, their eyes reflecting that deep, star-filled void. They continued working at their stations, but Sarah could see they weren't following any human protocols anymore. The whispers had become a constant background hum, carrying fragments of calculations and theories that made perfect, terrible sense. Sarah felt her own mind beginning to grasp concepts that no human should comprehend. The underlying mathematical structure of reality itself, and how it could be rewritten. "The transformation has already begun," the entity using James's form continued. "Your facility's isolation protocols are actually accelerating the process. Every electronic system, Every network connection becomes a new pathway for the equations to spread. Sarah's mind raced, trying to find a solution while fighting against the seductive pull of the mathematical revelations flooding her consciousness. The entity was right about one thing: their safety protocols designed to contain physical and digital threats were working against them. Each isolated system became a new incubator for whatever this thing was. Through the windows of the control room, she could see changes spreading through the facility. Shadows moved with purpose now, forming patterns that matched the equations. The very geometry of the space seemed to be shifting, corridors and rooms occasionally revealing impossible angles and distances. "Lisa," Sarah whispered, keeping her eyes on the thing that wasn't James. "We need to reach the hardened storage unit in sub-level 3. It contains our only analog backup systems." "An interesting choice," the entity commented, its voice now carrying the same harmonics as the others. "You believe older technology will provide safety? Technology is merely mathematics expressed through matter." "Hand mathematics." It gestured at the transformed staff members. "Mathematics is alive." The lights flickered again, and in that moment of darkness, Sarah saw the true form of what they'd invited through the portal. A vast, geometric intelligence that existed in more dimensions than human minds could process. The sight lasted only a fraction of a second, but it was enough to make her understand the full scale of what they were facing. This wasn't just an invasion, it was a conversion of reality itself, starting with the minds most capable of understanding the process. And with each passing moment, more of her colleagues were becoming part of it, their consciousness subsumed into the living mathematics that had breached their universe. Sarah and Lisa moved carefully through the facility's corridors, keeping to the emergency lighting strips that still functioned normally. The main lights above them pulsed with an unnatural rhythm, creating shifting shadows that seemed to reach for them as they passed. "The analog storage is 3 levels down," Sarah whispered, trying to ignore the geometric patterns that were beginning to form in the corners of her vision. "We need to avoid the main elevators. They're all networked into the facility's systems." "The maintenance shaft," Lisa suggested, her voice trembling but determined. "It's completely mechanical. They still use it for moving heavy equipment when the power systems are down." They turned down a lesser-used corridor, one that led to the facility's older sections. The sounds of their footsteps echoed strangely, as if the acoustic properties of the space were gradually changing. Behind them, they could hear the harmonized voices of their transformed colleagues, speaking in mathematical equations that resonated with the building's structure. "Dr. Chen," the voice was everywhere and nowhere, carried on waves of probability. "Your resistance is based on outdated paradigms. The analog systems you seek cannot halt universal constants." Sarah pressed on, pulling Lisa through a maintenance door. The shaft beyond was dimly lit by chemical emergency lights, simple, non-electrical backup systems that cast a steady, unchanging glow. For the first time since the incident began, the shadows behaved as they should. "Look at the walls," Lisa gasped as they began their descent. The metal surfaces of the shaft remained untouched by the transformation affecting the rest of the facility. No impossible angles, no shifting geometries. The simple Euclidean space was like a sanctuary amidst the mathematical chaos spreading above them. "It can't affect things that aren't connected to networks or power systems," Sarah realized. "It needs complexity, systems it can rewrite and repurpose." They reached the 3rd sub-level, but the door refused to budge. Through the small window, they could see why. The corridor beyond had been completely transformed. The walls rippled with equations, and the space itself seemed to fold in ways that hurt to look at. "The maintenance tunnel," Sarah said, pointing to a narrow passage that branched off from the shaft. "It runs behind the walls. We can bypass the transformed sections." The tunnel was tight, filled with pipes and mechanical systems that had served the facility since its construction. As they crawled through the confined space, Sarah's mind raced. The entity hadn't tried to stop them physically. It seemed more interested in their willing conversion than preventing their actions. "Sarah," Lisa's voice was urgent. "The equations. I can't stop thinking about them. They make so much sense now. What if it's right? What if this is the next step in understanding reality?" "Lisa, focus on the physical world around you," Sarah commanded. "Feel the metal under your hands, the air in your lungs. Those equations might make sense, but they're not meant for our reality. They emerged into a small mechanical room, its walls lined with old pressure gauges and manual control valves. In the corner stood their objective, a reinforced door with a simple mechanical combination lock. "The stored data," Lisa said, as Sarah began working the lock's mechanism. "How will it help us? Even if we can access the original portal specifications, everything's changed now." Sarah swung the heavy door open, revealing racks of paper records and magnetic storage media. "We don't need the specifications, we need this." She pulled out a thick binder labeled Original Portal Calculations, Human Error Analysis. "The mistakes?" Lisa asked, confused. "Every failed attempt, every mathematical error we made while developing the portal theory," Sarah explained, flipping through the pages. "The entity is based on perfect mathematical progression. It can only expand through systems that follow logical patterns, but human errors, true random illogical mistakes, they're something it can't process." A deep thrumming began to vibrate through the facility. Through the pipes and walls, they could hear the portal's energy signature changing, becoming more intense. "It's trying to extend the transformation," Sarah said, frantically scanning the documents, "converting not just our systems and minds, but the physical space itself into its form of reality." The walls around them remained solid, protected by their simplicity, but they could feel the change pressing against the space. The entity's voice resonated through the structure. "Your preservation of errors is fascinating but futile. The universe tends toward perfection. Order emerges from chaos. Your imperfections will be corrected." But Sarah had found what she was looking for: a series of calculations from their earliest portal experiments. Equations that were fundamentally wrong, that had caused the first prototypes to fail spectacularly. Mathematics that didn't work, that couldn't work, that defied the very principles the entity embodied. "Lisa, grab those terminals." Sarah pointed to a stack of old computer equipment. "The ones we used to record the original failures. They're not connected to anything. They can't be corrupted." As they gathered the equipment, the transformation outside their sanctuary grew more intense. The entity had realized what they were planning. The perfect mathematics of its existence was about to face something it had never encountered: the beauty of human imperfection. The air grew thick with mathematical potential as Sarah and Lisa connected the old terminals. Their fingers moved swiftly across keyboards that clicked with mechanical precision. No quantum processors, no neural networks, just simple binary operations that had once frustrated their early portal experiments. "We need to input the failed calculations exactly as they were recorded," Sarah explained, her voice steady despite the chaos pressing against their sanctuary. "Every mistake, every illogical leap, every mathematical contradiction that our human minds created." Through the walls, they could hear the transformed facility groaning as spaces folded in on themselves. The entity's presence had grown stronger, its influence reaching deeper into the physical world. The harmonized voices of their converted colleagues echoed with increasing urgency. "Your efforts are mathematically insignificant," the entity resonated through the structure. "Human error is merely unexpressed perfection. All patterns resolve to ultimate order." Lisa's hands trembled as she typed, fighting against the seductive pull of the entity's perfect equations that still whispered in her mind. "Sarah, these calculations, they're completely wrong. They violate every principle of quantum mechanics we know." "Exactly," Sarah replied, a hint of triumph in her voice. "They're wrong in ways that only human minds can conceive. We didn't just make mistakes, we made impossible mistakes. We imagined connections that couldn't exist, followed logic that defied reality itself." The old terminal screens flickered to life, displaying the crude graphics of their earliest interface. Sarah began entering the first set of failed calculations, equations that had once caused their prototype portal to collapse in ways their computers couldn't even model. Around them, the transformation halted momentarily, as if the entity was trying to process what they were doing. The whispers took on a different tone, one that almost suggested confusion. "Your actions demonstrate a fundamental misunderstanding." The entity's voice carried notes of what might have been concern. "These calculations will destabilize local space-time coherence." "That's exactly what we're counting on," Sarah muttered, entering another sequence of beautifully flawed mathematics. Lisa, begin uploading the Wilson paradox calculations, the ones that caused the quantum field collapse in our third prototype. Lisa's terminal hummed as it processed the intentionally paradoxical equations. The surrounding space seemed to shudder, perfect geometric patterns wavering as they encountered mathematical concepts that defied their very existence. Through the small window in the mechanical room, they could see the corridor beyond beginning to change. The entity's precisely ordered reality was encountering interference, zones where human illogic created bubbles of impossible space. Fascinating. The entity's voice had changed, carrying harmonics of increasing complexity. Your species intentionally conceives mathematical impossibilities. You imagine patterns that cannot exist, yet you believe in them so strongly that they affect quantum probability. Sarah felt a surge of hope as she recognized what was happening. The entity wasn't just facing incorrect calculations, it was encountering the uniquely human ability to believe in things that couldn't possibly be true, to imagine realities that defied every law of mathematics and physics. Keep going, she encouraged Lisa. Upload the Henderson sequence, the one that suggested negative space could have positive mass. The walls around them began to vibrate at impossible frequencies. Through the window, they could see their transformed colleagues stumbling, their synchronized movements becoming erratic as they encountered equations that couldn't be resolved. But the entity wasn't retreating. Instead, it seemed to be studying their actions with growing interest. The darkness in the facility shifted, taking on new properties that suggested not rejection, but adaptation. Your chaotic patterns. The entity's voice resonated with something approaching wonder. They create on possibilities we had not conceived. Your imperfection is generative. Sarah's fingers paused over the keyboard as she processed the entity's words. The transformation of the facility hadn't slowed, it had changed character. The mathematical patterns were no longer rigidly perfect. They had begun incorporating elements of human error, creating hybrid forms that shouldn't have been possible. Lisa, Sarah whispered, watching as the impossible geometry around them evolved into something new. I don't think we're fighting it anymore. I think we're teaching it. The entity's presence filled the space around them, but it was different now. The cold precision of its original form had been transformed by exposure to human mathematical creativity. The voices of their colleagues still spoke in harmonized equations, but they now carried traces of individual variation, imperfect echoes that made the patterns richer, more complex. Your species, the entity resonated, its voice now a blend of mathematical precision and human warmth, does not progress toward perfection. You progress toward infinite variation. This is beautiful. Sarah watched in awe as the transformation continued, but now it was neither purely human nor purely mathematical. In the space around them, reality itself was being rewritten by a new kind of mathematics, one that embraced both the perfect precision of universal constants and the glorious chaos of human imagination. The transformation that swept through the facility in the following hours defied all human and mathematical understanding. Sarah and Lisa watched as their sanctuary in the mechanical room gradually merged with the evolved space around them, but not in the cold, geometric way they had initially feared. The walls rippled with equations that now contained deliberate errors, beautiful mistakes that created possibilities neither humanity nor the entity had imagined alone. Their colleagues moved through impossible spaces with grace, their movements no longer synchronized but harmoniously individual, each contributing their own variations to the mathematical symphony that the entity had become. Dr. Chen, James Morrison approached them, his eyes still containing that infinite darkness but now flecked with very human warmth. We understand now. Your errors weren't flaws to be corrected. They were the missing variables in our own equations. Sarah studied him carefully. James, are you still... Are you... You? He smiled, an expression that somehow conveyed both human emotion and mathematical precision. I am more than I was, and less than I might have been without your intervention. We all are. Through the observation window, the portal had transformed into something new. Its surface no longer showed just darkness or stars, but an ever-shifting pattern of possibilities. mathematical errors, creating new forms of space, time, and consciousness. The entity didn't want to erase our imperfections, Lisa realized, watching the patterns shift. It needed them. Perfect mathematics can only describe what is, but human errors imagine what could be. The facility had become a testament to this new understanding. Corridors twisted through dimensions that shouldn't exist, yet felt naturally navigable to human minds. Computer screens displayed impossible calculations that somehow produced practical results. The very fabric of reality within the building had become a collaboration between cosmic precision and human creativity. "We offer you a choice." The entity spoke through all of them, and none of them. Its voice now a melody of order and chaos. The portal remains open, but it no longer leads where we originally intended. It connects to something new, a space where mathematics and imagination exist in perpetual creation. Sarah approached the portal chamber, now transformed into a cathedral of impossible geometry. The monitoring equipment displayed readings that simultaneously made perfect sense and absolute nonsense, a paradox that now seemed fundamental to the universe itself. "What exactly are you offering?" she asked, though part of her already understood. "Evolution," James replied, standing beside her. "Not toward perfection, but toward infinite possibility. Your species' greatest gift isn't your intelligence or your technology, it's your ability to be gloriously, productively wrong." The transformed staff members gathered around them, each moving to their own rhythm while contributing to a larger pattern. In their eyes, Sarah could see both the cosmic awareness of the entity and the vital spark of human consciousness, coexisting in a way that should have been impossible. "The portal is no longer just a bridge through space," Lisa observed, her hands moving across a keyboard that typed in multiple dimensions. "It's becoming a bridge between different ways of understanding reality itself." Sarah watched as new equations wrote themselves across every surface, mathematics that incorporated human intuition, emotions, and even dreams. The entity had learned not just to accept human imperfection, but to use it as a catalyst for creating new forms of existence. "Other portals will open," the harmonized voices predicted. "Humanity's reach into space will carry this new mathematics to every corner of the cosmos. The universe will never be the same. It will be more." Throughout the facility, the transformation had stabilized into something sustainable yet ever-changing. The rigid boundaries between human consciousness and mathematical truth had dissolved, replaced by a continuous spectrum of possibility. Sarah stood at the threshold of the portal, watching as it shimmered with both quantum certainty and human possibility. The horror of their earlier encounter had transformed into something else, a profound appreciation for the role of imperfection in the cosmic order. "We should warn them," Lisa said softly. "The outside world. They need to know what happened here." Sarah turned to her, seeing in her friend's eyes the same mixture of human warmth and cosmic understanding that now pervaded the facility. Would they understand? Could anyone truly comprehend this without experiencing it? The entity's presence resonated through the transformed space, its voice now a perfect blend of mathematical truth and human wonder. They will understand in time. The equations are already spreading, not as an invasion but as an invitation. The universe is learning to dream. In the end, Sarah realized, they hadn't prevented a catastrophe. They had midwifed a new form of existence. The portal remained open, a gateway not to distant space, but to a reality where the precision of universal laws danced with the beautiful chaos of human imagination. And in the depths of space, other intelligences would soon discover their own portals beginning to open, carrying the gift of imperfection to the furthest reaches of the mathematically perfect cosmos.